She knocked on my door during a storm. By morning, nothing was the same. The pounding on my front door came so suddenly that I almost dropped the coffee mug from my hands. Outside, the thunder shook the windows of my small farmhouse in rural Vermont, and rain crashed against the porch like an endless waterfall. No one should have been out in weather like that. Yet whoever stood outside refused to leave, knocking again with a desperation that somehow cut through the roar of the storm. I had spent 3 years hiding from the world after losing everything that mattered to me. I never imagined that opening that door would change not only one stranger's life, but my own forever. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness, hope, forgiveness, compassion, and second chances can still change lives, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, leave a comment about what kindness means to you, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another heartfelt story. My name is Nathan, and I lived alone outside the small town of Woodstock, Vermont. After my wife Rachel passed away from an illness several years earlier, silence became my closest companion. I repaired antique furniture in my workshop during the day, and spent quiet evenings staring at family photographs that reminded me of the life I once had. Friends had stopped inviting me to gatherings because I always declined. Church members still checked on me occasionally, but even their kindness couldn't fill the empty spaces inside my heart. I convinced myself that surviving was enough, even if I had forgotten what living actually felt like. When I finally opened the door that stormy evening, I found a young woman standing barefoot on my porch, completely soaked from the rain. Her long brown hair clung to her face, and her oversized white sweater was dripping onto the wooden floorboards. She looked exhausted, frightened, and completely out of strength. Her name, I later learned, was Grace. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't selling anything. She simply asked if she could stay somewhere warm until the storm passed, because her car had broken down several miles away after attending a job interview in New Hampshire. Something inside me hesitated. Years of loneliness had built invisible walls around my heart. Letting a stranger into my home felt risky. But another part of me remembered how Rachel always believed that every person deserved compassion before judgment. That memory quietly won. I stepped aside and invited Grace inside. She spent the next hour wrapped in a blanket while I prepared hot soup and tea. As the rain continued outside, the house slowly became less silent than it had been in years. We spoke cautiously at first. Grace explained that after caring for her elderly father through a long illness, she had spent nearly all of her savings. After he passed away, she struggled to find stable work. The interview she'd attended represented her last hope before losing the apartment she rented in Albany, New York. Unfortunately, the interview hadn't gone well, and then the storm had stranded her on an unfamiliar road. Listening to her story stirred something I hadn't felt for a long time. My own pain suddenly seemed connected to someone else's instead of trapping me alone. We weren't comparing tragedies. We were simply two people who had quietly carried heavy burdens for longer than anyone realized. That evening, the electricity briefly failed. We sat near the fireplace while candles flickered across the room. Instead of talking about loss, we spoke about dreams we had once abandoned. Grace confessed she had always wanted to become an elementary school teacher because she believed children deserved adults who encouraged them. I admitted that before life became complicated, Rachel and I had dreamed of turning my workshop into a place where young people could learn woodworking and practical skills. The storm raged through the night, but somehow the darkness inside my home felt lighter than it had in years. Early the next morning, the skies cleared into brilliant blue. Birds returned to the trees as if nothing had happened. Together, we drove to where Grace's car had broken down. A local mechanic, Samuel, managed to repair it more quickly than expected. Before she left, Grace thanked me with tears in her eyes, saying that she had almost given up believing good people still existed. Her words stayed with me long after her car disappeared down the country road. Weeks passed. Then an unexpected letter arrived. Grace had accepted a teaching position at a nearby elementary school in Vermont. Instead of returning to New York, she had chosen to start over close to the place where someone had shown her compassion during the darkest night of her life. Along with the letter was an invitation asking whether I would consider teaching woodworking to her students once a month. For the first time since Rachel's passing, I smiled without forcing it. The workshop that had echoed with loneliness slowly filled with children's laughter, curious questions, and tiny hands learning to sand wooden birdhouses. Grace watched proudly as her students discovered confidence they never knew they possessed. Parents volunteered. Neighbors joined. Soon, our little community project became something much bigger than either of us imagined. One rainy evening almost a year later, I stood on that same front porch where Grace had once knocked during the storm. The weather looked strangely familiar, but everything else had changed. My home no longer felt empty. The silence had been replaced by purpose, friendship, and hope. I finally understood that healing rarely arrives the way we expect. Sometimes, it doesn't come through grand miracles. Sometimes, it simply arrives as a frightened stranger asking for shelter during a storm. If this story has touched your heart or reminded you that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life forever, please support this video by liking it, sharing it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribing for more inspiring stories that celebrate compassion and faith. Before this story ends, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below and tell us about a moment when someone's kindness changed your life, or when you were able to change someone else's with a simple act of compassion. As I locked my front door that evening, I looked toward the quiet road stretching into the distance. I realized that storms don't always arrive to destroy us. Sometimes they wash away the walls we've built around our hearts, making room for hope to enter. Grace had knocked on my door seeking shelter from the rain, but by morning, she had unknowingly rescued a man who believed his life would never have purpose again. And ever since that unforgettable night in Vermont, every storm has reminded me that the greatest blessings often arrive disguised as unexpected visitors.